Let's all just take a deep breath and get present because here we are at Soul Empowerment. My name is David McLeod. I am your life mastery coach and one of the panelists on this wonderful, wonderful journey that we're on, which is really about empowering our souls, bringing our souls more into prominence in our lives. And today we have a really, really interesting conversation about this notion of quantum leap, where sometimes we go through these life experiences that seem like wake-up calls. And I don't know about you, but I tend to, well, for the earlier part of my life, tended to just kind of click the snooze button and roll over and go back to sleep. So I really didn't pay attention to my wake-up calls when they were there at the beginning. But each of us has our own different story. And sooner or later, I think all of us get a wake-up call that is just, you cannot ignore it any longer. You have to make a choice about continuing and moving forward and jumping ahead in your life, or stopping altogether, I guess. Well, before we go into the details of that conversation, I'd just really like to introduce or have each of my co-hosts introduce him or herself. And I'm going to start with you today, Sarah. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us where you are, what you do.
Hi, I'm Sarah, or Sarah Jane, you choose. I'm comfortable with both. I'm in the UK, down on the south coast, and it's my own healing journey that empowers the work that I do, the things, the support I bring to others, very much to do with the inner child, trauma, hurt and pain. And I love what I bring. I really do. I work with energy in the form of Reiki and in the form of sound, toning particularly. And I just love what I do. And I am very grateful for the journey that I have had so far. And I wouldn't change anything, even the tough stuff.
Thank you, Sarah. And moving around in my little crazy circle today, I'm gonna go to you, Scott. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell us where you are and what you do.
Hey, Scott Holmes. Live in Boston, just on the south of Boston, and I am a. The title has changed any number of times, but it's a intuitive quantum healer. And I was told that by three different people that that's what I should use because that's what I do. And much like Sarah, I came to it later in life, understood that there was something there, and it's really formulated throughout the journey that I've had in my life to be able to get to the point where I want to share it with people. I want to help people to heal. How do you do that? By allowing mostly. And much like what Sarah said, it's gratitude. Gratitude for the life we have, the fact that we have this life in this meat suit, and that we are all experiencing that. And when we travel, you get to meet people of all ages, of all economic abilities, all over the world. Pretty much, they all want the same thing: safety, to security, and to be loved. It's a wonderful thing.
Beautiful.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Scott. And of course, last but by no means least, Gail, please tell us who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Hello, welcome everyone. I'm Gail Nowak, and I am on a mission to redefine leadership for those who are destined to be leaders in the new earth. We're going through some unprecedented changes and evolution, and as exciting as that can be, it can also be, frankly, terrifying and can really create a lot of rapid change and uncertainty. And so I personally specialize in guiding New Earth leaders to show up and speak up and shine confidently, no matter what's potentially standing in the way or perceived to be standing in the way, so that they can uplift humanity and share their own magic with the world. And I do that through energy as well. I take an energy first healing centered approach to coaching and retreats that transform the way that you communicate and the way that you show up in the world. And for me, I would say I'm kind of following on the heels of my panelists here, much like Sarah and Scott, and I know David too. My own healing and spiritual journey is really the why behind what I do, learning how to go from someone who was afraid to speak truth, afraid to share, afraid to show up confidently. That journey of healing has brought me to where I am today personally and to the work that I do professionally. So I'm excited for this topic in particular. We get to talk about those wake-up calls, and we get to talk about those transformational shifts that happen along the path of quantum leaping, as we are calling it today.
Well, thank you, Gail, for your share, and thanks everybody for all of what you do in the world. I think each of us has our own way of sharing whatever truth has been revealed to us, and doing it in the way that feels natural and intuitive and um, normal for us to do. So I'm really grateful to have this group of people working with me on this panel. And one of the things, this whole notion of quantum leap has been something that we talked about. We've talked about it in many different situations, but we decided to take it head on and come at it with a lot of intention, and to see what we could share about our own learnings in that regard. And as I was thinking about this today, the idea for me is, we're talking about quantum shifts in consciousness is really what we're talking about. And as I was thinking about that, I thought, well, all right, what are the levels of consciousness? I mean, really, if I was thinking about this, I said, okay, what's it like to be unconscious? That is, to have no awareness at all of what's going on around me. And I was trying to think if that had ever happened to me. And I can think of two situations where that kind of lack of awareness seems to be prevalent. One of them is when I'm sleeping. I mean, when I'm asleep, I'm not always aware of what's going on around me. So I have a certain, I don't know what's happening. I obviously I'm still alive. I have a sense of that aliveness, but I'm not as aware of all the things that are going on around me when I'm asleep. And then the other one that really hit me the other day, I was thinking about what happens when you go under general anesthesia. Now, in that case, it's like I'm completely detached from my essence when that happens, because I have no awareness at all. And even when I come back out of the anesthesia and come back into what I guess might be called normal consciousness, I can't remember anything that happened during that time frame. Now, this may not be true for everybody. I know that there are stories of people who have, been somewhat conscious during, anesthesia or whatever. And I know that people don't have the same kind of sleep experience that I do. But it just really made me think so much about the levels of consciousness. And so on an average day kind of thing, each of us, we go through our lives, we do the things that we do, we have a certain level of consciousness. But somewhere along the way, we might have a wake-up call or some kind of I don't want to call it a traumatic event, but let's just say a very intense event that activates something within us that makes us jump a whole level, that all of a sudden I see things in ways that I never saw before. And once I get there, I don't want to go back to here, you know? And yet, even so, my ego mind still has that pull. And sometimes it just kind of wants to pull me back down into this lower level of consciousness. And I really have to work. So that's kind of where we're coming from here today. It's really about how do we engage levels of consciousness so that we can make those jumps and stay at the new level? And how do we recognize when we're there? That's kind of what we're talking about. I know that was a long explanation. I'm sorry, but So I'm just going to open the floor now, and whoever feels like talking, please just jump in. Oh, and before you do, I just want to say, Kate, I see you're here on the show. Thank you so much for being here in person. If you have comments or questions, please feel free to share them in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond.
I'd like to start because I was thinking about this earlier today as well. And I was thinking, yeah, we've used that word quantum leap, and that can suggest bells and whistles and fireworks and all sorts of things.
Right.
But it's not the same for everybody. You know, we are all uniquely different. I'm thinking about the wake-up call that I had that eventually made me leave my marriage because I shouldn't have been in it, and those type of things. But I think it was about a light bulb moment. That's the way I like to put it. And I suppose it was my heart and my soul getting through to my head.
Nice.
Mhm.
It's a pretty good way of putting it, actually. And it was that I remember standing in the kitchen and suddenly thinking, why am I worrying about what other people think about me when they're not? They've got so much going on in their own lives. They're just not, and if they are thinking about me, it doesn't matter. And that was a very freeing moment, in spite of the fact I sort of was in the process of freeing myself from my marriage and taking control of my own life. It was that light bulb moment that I suppose was the biggest, for want of a way of putting it, quantum leap. But it was, to me, it was just absolutely, it was oh, for goodness sake, you've spent so many years worrying about what other people think about you. And suddenly it's got through to you. And I wasn't even on this I hadn't got to this stage of journey when that came to me.
Right.
And it was wonderful. It really was. But then there've been much quieter things that have happened. I learned a technique called metamorphic technique. And to become a practitioner, not only did you have to offer 50 sessions, you had to receive 20. And it helps change energy pathways in your body that helps you to get rid of old unwanted behaviors. Absolutely, we all require that ability to be able to say, that served its purpose, I can let that go. And I remember and it was actually once I was in this house, mind you, it was right back at the beginning of being here, sort of within about a year of being here. And something happened, and I would normally have gone off into stress and whatever. And I didn't. And it was only a few days more, a couple of weeks later, and I thought, wow, I didn't behave the way I would have done. And so some things creep up on you slowly, and some can be like that light bulb. And it was thinking about, we all come to these things very differently. And don't think because anything you hear here has to be how it has to be. Because you are a unique individual with your own chosen experiences, and it will come in your way that is right for you.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that. And I do like the light bulb moment versus the gentle arrival kind of differentiation. I think that's really important. Right. And you may not even know that you've gone through this shift until after the fact. And now you look back and you say, wow, that's a whole new way for me to show up. I really like that. So who's next? Scott, go ahead.
So, thank you, Sarah. The unconscious to the conscious to the subconscious to a different level of perception. My wife passed after a really prolonged illness. She'd been up and down with breast cancer for 20 years. And right afterwards, you talk about somnambulate, just sleepwalking, that lack of awareness, that lack of just any recognition of other than putting one foot in front of the other and trying to survive. You're in survival mode. I find that a lot of people are, especially when they're going through any kind of trauma, is that survival mode. And it's a very, very small world that they perceive. It's just, what am I feeling? How am I going to do it? What am I going to react? How am I going to go? How am I going to be safe? And then coming to the conscious, as grief lessened for me, just being conscious of everything around me and more of myself than I had been probably in 30 years, because of being a caregiver, everything centering around my wife and my family, and ignoring myself. And that's when I was able to start opening up. Quantum leap, you can call it a leap, or you can call it falling off a cliff. Which is it? Is it allowing? Is it striving towards something, or is it allowing what is within you to come out? And for me, while I've always thought of ascension, and you go to the great masters and they've ascended to a great height and they see all of these things, for me it was allowing things to come from here, come to the heart. And for me, it was feeling and being more conscious of everything and everyone and everything around me in my life than I ever had been. And that is where, for me, the leap truly was. It was allowing. It was like falling off a cliff and just continuously going down further into myself, further into those places I didn't want to see, further into those emotions I didn't want to deal with, further into those traumas that I had when I was 5, when I was 8, when I was 17, when I was 22. All of those things that you stash away and you don't want to deal with. You want to just kind of push them down. But allowing them to come through and just seeing them for what they are, and seeing that I'm a 60-year-old man now. I don't have to react like a 17-year-old boy because someone said something that would set me off. I don't speak through that voice. It doesn't mean it doesn't come up. It doesn't mean it went away. It just means when it comes up, I look at it and say, thank you very much. I have this, and allow it to go down. And then I speak through my voice. And I do that. And I think we've talked about this many times, just taking a breath. That one simple breath has saved me so much from strife in life, because I haven't said the first thing that pops into my head, which is always very, very dangerous at times. So I'm not speaking through anything other than through here, through my soul. The quantum leap, while we think of it as a change in perception, mostly for me anyway, was here. The leap was into me, and it was a leap of faith into who I am, into my soul empowerment. I think a lot of what all of us do is allowing the soul in other people to come out and be seen and be heard and to show through. And when that happens, brilliant things happen.
That's beautiful, Scott. Thank you for sharing that. I really like that you're right. Most often we think of um, a quantum leap as being upwards or outwards, or it's out there someplace. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up, because what I have learned is in is the only way out.
Mhm.
And in reality, this ascension that we think about is really a, more of a descension into the truth of who we really are. So it's interesting how it's just a question of, I think the reason that we use that word ascension is because when we have the experience of a quantum leap, of whatever that might be, it comes with it a huge amount of opening and expansion. It's like before my quantum leap happened, a lot of my activity was based around my ego mind, and that tends to be pretty, closed down and compressed. And, everything is all about fear when you're dealing with the ego mind. But once you make that move towards your soul and start embracing the truth of your soul, it seems like all of a sudden that fear goes away. You know, it doesn't mean that I'm suddenly invincible and I'm not going to be at risk of any kind of physical ailment or anything like that. It just means that I now no longer dwell upon that stuff. And that is where the opening comes in. And I think that's what we're all talking about here. We just have different ways of describing it. So I want to thank you for that. That was beautiful, man. Thank you. Gail.
Yeah, wow, this is deep today. I love it. I love it. And I'm wondering if we should have called it the quantum dive because it is
See, there you go.
it is an internal process, and it
Yeah.
is diving deep and taking an honest look at how we're showing up in our lives. That's been my experience of those even little tiny shifts, as well as what we are calling today that quantum shift, that permanent long lasting shift. And I love, David, what you were saying about, making that distinction around ascension. And for me, I think about it as, ascension speaks to the energy. It speaks to raising our vibration. But in
Right.
order for us
Yeah.
to actually do that, we have to make room for the soul to come down into our body. And if our body, our energy field, our physical body is full of just full of things that aren't true for us, that don't represent, I was going to say negative, but that doesn't really feel right.
Right.
Full of things that are not of our essence, our true essence, whether that's from conditioning or pain or wounding or fear or survival patterns, right? If that's filling us up, the soul can't come in. We can't, it can, but it's not going to be fully integrated until we let go and
Right.
we heal those things that really aren't true for us anyway. And I love this conversation because it's bringing up new awarenesses for me around the fact of one of the biggest quantum dives, I would say, for me, is around this idea of my needs don't matter, which was an idea that was very that was born when I was small. Um, through my upbringing, through just family dynamics, origin of family type things. Um, and it's really been a core wounding theme and a core healing theme for me that has fundamentally changed how I'm showing up in the world in a permanent way by doing that healing work, by recognizing, oh, I've been carrying around this, what I call and what I've learned from my coach training, this small t truth that my needs don't matter. When the true truth, right? The truth of my soul, the truth of my essence, the truth in my heart is that I make my needs matter. And these last few years, I would say that the quantum dive that I've been working on, that came up as that light bulb moment, like, oh, the realization of, oh, wow, this is how the awareness, the awakening of this is how I've been showing up, and this is why things have kind of unfolded. And geez, I actually could have a different experience if I changed this. Well, sometimes we stop at that, like that knowing of I could change it. And we don't commit to actually making the change because those are the waters we're used to swimming in. We know that there's probably going to be some sacrifices, whether they're big or small, and we're not really sure if we want to do that. And I think that that's a really important piece to talk about in this conversation about quantum leap, is that we always have that choice. We can change. We are we can live our life at the mercy of life, and at the mercy of things happening from our perspective as to us, even though I personally believe everything is happening for us. Those things that happen to us that we don't like, it's there to mirror how we're showing up in the world. And if we're not liking that, it's a sign, it's a clue, it's a hint that, hey, you have a choice here. We're just reminding you, you can keep going on this way and you're going to keep seeing this, or you can start to make room for your heart, for your soul, and have a completely different experience.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, this idea of making room, as Scott was saying, opening up and accepting what is, that's really, really important. By the way, you talked about needs, and I just had this light bulb moment. We need to have a topic called "My Needs Don't Matter." So please, somebody write that down. But the other thing I wanted to come to is now I've lost my train of thought, because you said so many amazing things there, and you were talking about how some of the things that you learned were as a result of conditioning. And there's something that I read just last night, as a matter of fact, unrelated to this topic. Ooh, sorry, I flapped my camera there. The idea of how innocent and innocuous this so-called conditioning can be. And this is David R. Hawkins. He's just a brilliant writer, and I really like what he says. But in this particular statement, he says, sometimes a child can be influenced by a very simple, innocuous statement, not even directed to the child. For example, your mom and dad might be talking, and you're just sitting there playing with your blocks. You're 2 years old or whatever, and you hear mom commenting on something that dad said, saying, "Yeah, it looks like cancer runs in the family." Now the kid, not even really aware of what cancer is or what that means, suddenly takes it on as a belief system. Because mommy said it, it must be true. Cancer runs in our family. Now that becomes a belief system, and who knows? The child himself can later on develop cancer as a result of that one very, very simple thing. So when you talk about conditioning, we all, I believe, every single one of us, we have an obligation to ourselves to go back deep, 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 deep into our childhood and look for all those examples. Because when I read that, I thought, oh my God, I wonder how many things my parents said that weren't directed at me. I can remember the ones that were directed at me, but the ones that were not, how did they influence my growing up? So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's a really, really important topic. So, Scott, I see you've unmuted. You wanted to say something here.
Yeah, you talk about how we have been affected by our parents and what they have said. Conditioning. This is the way things are. You hear them. This is the way we do things. This is how things are done. As a parent, I have that question about, oh my God, what have I done to my kids?
Exactly.
Or
Mhm.
when you're very, very stressed and you say something and you cover your mouth because it's your parents, your father coming out of your mouth. That one thing you said, I will never say that to my children ever, until it comes out
Until
of
you
your mouth.
do.
Until you do. It's the condition. It's that conditioning. But the other part of that is just being aware, and we've talked about words as being spells and how they can cast a spell and how they can have these long-term effects. But something you said was about perception. I was watching Dancing with the Stars. I know, unrelated, but totally related. And
It's
you
all
see,
related, dude.
It's all
it's all
related.
related. So there are people these are non-professionals who are dancing. Okay. And there are those that are counting because they want to do everything perfect, and they're very stiff, and they're doing the motion, but it's very 1, 2, 3, and they're counting and they're going through that, and they're very, very distanced from the whole environment, everything around them, the joy. And then there are those who aren't necessarily all that good, but have this incredible joy in what they're doing, how they're performing, in being present in that moment. I'm going to a wedding tomorrow night, and it's one of the few chances I have to get to dance. So I'm looking forward to it. But and I'm not very good, but I do a lot of it. So it's just that whole perception of it's the same event. Someone says, "Oh, I had a terrible time." Why? Well, I get really nervous about dancing. I don't want to be. And then me, I'm always the first one on the dance floor because I don't really care. And if you ever been to a wedding, 5 seconds in on the dance floor, everybody else joins you because they don't want to be the first. And so it's just that joy. And when you see someone who is dancing with joy or participating in something with joy or fully involved, you don't see the trappings. You see that person. You see the energy they're
Right.
giving. You see that joy that they're really participating in, and they don't have to be perfect. I was always stopped in my life because I wanted to be perfect. When I stopped being perfect, I actually lived more life. But it's just those things that you brought. You really struck those notes with me. Thank you, David.
Well, thank you. And, just to come back to what you were saying about, oh my God, what have I done as a parent? Here's something that a lot of parents don't even have that awareness to say, oh my God, what have I done? If you have a moment like that and you actually ask yourself, oh my God, what have I done? Go talk to your kid. Go talk to your kid.
Absolutely.
Here is where real magic can happen. You talk to your kid and you say, I really screwed up. I said something that I promised I would never say because my mom used to say that to me, and I know how horrible it made me feel. And I said that to you. And I can't take back the words, but I can now give you the truth of my heart and tell you that I love you forever and ever, no matter what, always, always, always. And that I will try never to say something like that again because I really don't believe it's true. And it was just a reaction, blah, 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 whatever the truth might be. This is the nature of conscious parenting. And how can you be a conscious parent if you're not aware of yourself? And so quantum leap stuff or any kind of up leveling of consciousness means that all aspects of your life should be improving because you're bringing your truth now more authentically and more legitimately into that space. So that's kind of what having a quantum leap means. The universe has said, okay, I think you're ready. You're smart enough, you're good enough, and bam, here's a higher level of consciousness for you. Now go and prove that I'm right. That's kind of how the universe operates.
Yeah, David, I want to hop on this conscious parenting discussion because this is very big in my life and in my world, and something I feel very passionate about. And we've talked about it on the show multiple times about making repairs, right? My kids are in their teens now, but going into starting a family and raising kids, I was going into it from the perspective of there are certain things that I'm not going to do that were modeled from my parents, right? And at the time, like, I think that was a good foundation. And now looking back, I can see, okay, there's some flawed thinking there because I'm still parenting based on my based on what I saw from my own parents, right? It's just flipping it, but it's kind of the same energy. And so I was just so terrified of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And it's like what you were saying, Scott, about dancing. Like, oh boy, you want to talk about a dance. Parenting is a dance. All relationships are a dance, right? But it felt so high stakes to me. And I didn't at that time have the skills of like Really, it's being present, and it's being willing to own when you make a mistake, and it's being able to repair. Fast forward to today, right? This week even. I snapped at my this is just last night. Okay? So these can be big things, these can be little things. And I snapped at one of my kids because they wanted me to make another round of bacon. And personally, I don't take a lot of joy in bacon, handling raw meat and dealing with the bacon fat and all of that stuff. And I was just like, I don't want to do it. I was kind of acting, kind of like I don't want to do it. And I ended up making some more anyway. And something as small as
There's
that, I
never
said,
enough bacon.
there's never enough bacon. I just didn't want to be the one to do it, but also my 12-year-old is not quite there yet with
I know.
that level of culinary skills. And I was like, this really, I made this a bigger deal than it really needed to be. And I said to her, you know what, I'm sorry I snapped at you. And she was like, oh, Mom, it doesn't matter. I'm fine. And I said, well, you know what? It bothers me, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, and it really wasn't a big deal. And then we're moving on. So it's not really about perfection, and it's not like there's no way you cannot say the thing that you're never going to know how your kid how it's going to land with someone else, right? And so it is these principles of being present, but also knowing how to take ownership and take responsibility when you do make mistakes, and
Yeah.
knowing how to make those repairs and communicating that. Because I think that that's the place where sometimes we I don't want to say fall down, but we kind of forget to take it all the way through.
Yeah, that's right. And thank you for saying that. I mean, that's really important. And I would just like to add one more thing on top of that, that
Oh,
you don't have to
David, we
wait.
can't hear you.
Can you not hear me?
I can hear
Yeah,
you.
I can hear
Okay.
you now.
I don't know what happened there. I was just going to say, uh, just because your kids are older than teenagers, even in their 30s and 40s, doesn't mean they still don't see you as that big, powerful parent that they always saw when they were little. I had that very thing happen, between myself and my son, who is now, I think he's 37 or 38 years old. And I said something and I could see that he was hurt by it. And I became aware of that. And I immediately went to him and I said, I'm really sorry I said that. It doesn't matter how old he is or how young he is. You always have the power, if you make a mistake, to take responsibility for it and say, I messed up. I let my ego mind take control again. Thank you for being there and allowing me to say I'm sorry. The other thing is, teach your kids to accept the apology, because this is one of the things that we tend to do. We tend to just brush it off. Oh no, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We let people off the hook way too easily because we don't want to rock the boat, right? And sometimes we have to stop and say, I'm sorry, but that just didn't feel good. I really don't think I want to have that kind of interaction with you. Sometimes we have to put our boundaries in place, right, Sarah?
Oh, 100%. At the weekend, I got the chance to go up to Liverpool, and Liverpool was actually the hospital that I was in when I got scalded as a baby.
Mm.
I was in the burns unit there, and a place called Warrington on the outskirts of Liverpool, a smaller place within that called Penketh, was where we lived. And my youngest sister and myself, we went to visit my sister Gillian's grave. I don't ever remember. She was only 9 weeks old when she died. I was 18. Yeah, I was like 18 months old at the time. And it actually just happened to be the 7th of October. And that was the day she died 64
Mm.
years ago.
Wow.
Um, And so I got to do that, but I also got to be in Liverpool. I've had sort of something going on with my younger self, that a part of me's being not detached, but she's been off. She's had her own little healing journey, well away from me, but I know we've still been connected. And I'm talking about the Jane, the little one who went through all of that stuff. And it was amazing. I felt I was given a real gift. We tidied up the grave. I'd taken up some cyclamen from Mum, put one in each corner. And then I'd taken my shamanic drum up, and I went to sort of say, okay, time to get my drum. And I felt my body say, no, drum's not to be used. And I trust this. I use my body for dowsing quite a lot. And I felt that sway backwards, just a hint of, and I said, Jackie, no, I'm not meant to get my drum. Oh, she goes. I know we'd carried it all the way up there really carefully, and we had to give it back as well. But I started with that sound, but I was singing like language to Gillian and to the grave. But within seconds, I knew it wasn't about Gillian's grave. It was actually about this whole graveyard, which was a closed graveyard. Only anybody could be put in there if they were then going in a grave that already existed within the family. So it was a closed graveyard. And I found myself, and I don't hold back when it comes to things like that. And my younger sister, she said afterwards it was really beautiful, but a robin joined me. So a little robin was also singing. And one of the things many people say is, if you see a robin or if you see a butterfly, sort of, well, actually this scarf I'm wearing has got butterflies on it, and it was brand new, bought, it was gift from Gillian, if you like, and I got one for each of Mum, Katie, Jackie and myself. So as a gift from Gillian, I bought those on the Sunday. But Mum and I then got a chance to have a conversation yesterday. Yesterday. Oh God, where are the days going? No, we're Wednesday today. Yes, yesterday. And it's a very difficult one with my mother, because I have, as an adult, I have never ever blamed her for the accident that occurred to me. The adult understands circumstances. I've never blamed Gillian for dying. As the adult, I understand. But it's accepting the fact with young children, you cannot explain circumstances to them. And I actually spelt it out to my mother that the abuse of me at that time was the system. The system, they've sussed this. The system abused children back then by not letting their parents be with them. And that is where, so it was the separation that was the trauma, not the accident that was so much of the trauma. And my mother is a great one for saying, children are resilient. And I have said to her so many times, no, they are not. And I think she got it yesterday in the conversation. I'm 65, she's 86. I'm hoping that she's starting to get, actually, you have to be really thoughtful, considerate and careful what you say to and how you speak to children.
Correct.
And if that brings a quantum leap for her, that would be wonderful. But do you know what? Even if it starts the nudge in the right direction, because I have very clearly said, I have so few memories of my childhood because I felt unloved, unwanted, not good enough. That's got to be a very hard thing for a parent to hear. But it is about us being honest and true about ourselves. And our understandings as adults have to support our inner child, but they can also support those members of family that were there at the time those initial things occurred. And it is important as a child, at whatever age, as you were saying, it is important as a child that we are able to speak our truth. And no doubt she will have had her truths that, you know, she would have loved to have spoken to her parents, you know, and I was given that opportunity. I had an amazing weekend, and I felt nothing for being in Liverpool. The understanding that, but there's been some major healing going on with my little one, away from me, but still connected. That I'm feeling very blessed, and I have no idea where things are going to go from now. But she's back, and who knows? And is it a dive deep into ourselves, or are we so vast, our soul so vast, that actually our soul encompasses us, and we don't have to be as big as our soul, as our energy? And I won't go into that, but I have had an experience where the universe has showed me I have grown way beyond my physical form. So it can be an ascension into ourselves. It doesn't have to be a deep dive.
Right. These are all just words that we use to describe our own experience. That's all they are.
Yeah.
And you were talking about your mother and her gaining some awareness. I just want to say that in terms of waking up and becoming more conscious, it doesn't matter how old you are. This can happen at any time. It can happen multiple times in your life. And it's really a question of what are you choosing for yourself? Gail, you talked about choice and the power of choice and how important choice really is. Well, we all have the choice. And if my choice is just to continue living as a sleepwalker, well, then I'm going to have the kind of life that goes along with being a sleepwalker. But if I choose to have the kind of life where I have a gradual and perhaps a steady improvement and increase in my level of consciousness over time, then I'm going to have a very different kind of life than the other sleepwalker type. And this is all a question of choice. And maybe I'm here to just be a sleepwalker. Maybe that's my purpose in this particular manifestation of life. And that's quite possible. I know for myself that is not true. And I'm pretty sure that it's not true for any of the people on this panel. And I would say it's probably not true for anybody who watches this show or listens to what we talk about, because each of us is looking for ways to improve our lives. And the biggest way we can do that is by allowing ourselves to become more conscious moment by moment. And so, Sarah, you were talking about your experience at the graveyard, and you didn't use the word, but I was sensing that there was a lot of forgiveness going on in that experience. Either forgiveness for your friend or forgiveness for yourself, or just forgiveness for all, because forgiveness is what love is, right? Love is forgiveness. No, it's just a silly bumper sticker. I think love is a lot bigger than that, a lot more expansive than that. And we humans, we have chosen to call or make a distinction between conditional love and unconditional love. Frankly, conditional love is not love at all. It's a reward and punishment kind of system. That's what it is. True love has no conditions. And therefore, really, we shouldn't even be using the phrase unconditional love. It's redundant. Anyway, we've covered a lot of ground here, and I just want to make sure everybody has had a good say in the conversation. We still got 10 minutes to go, and I want to I know that Sarah and Scott both have to leave right at the top of the hour. So I want to give you both another chance to share if you like. And Gail and I can wrap up at the end. You're muted, Scott.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah.
Well, I was going to say that, would you like me to share a message in light language?
Oh, yeah, I love
I
that.
cannot translate it. I have no idea what I am saying.
That's
So,
fine.
is
Let's
it?
all just take a deep breath, though, and get present for this, because
Yeah. Oh, yes. I would
this is powerful stuff.
Yeah, I would say sort of relax, close eyes, invite your roots down into Mother Earth, deep into Mother Earth. Let them anchor into Mother Earth. And she is sending up her love and her protection. These words are going to be understood by your heart and your soul, but they will not be understood by your mind and your ego. Kim ta hashti tahamteke. Tarantahash tiakam tiha. Yuekta ektnitian shimekea. Tehachtana e a och. Temtai ka achtanakia. Lo tamanaiki. Fahash tiniki ma. Loet tanaki. Kimche taha mayo. Shamanoma ranai. Ik tatatarameke. Feha ish tanakoya. Namatakahan. Ik toramakatei. Share kush tanamaike. Haftanaka icht. Nasht toko hainakatai. Iran to amashi. Takatahana ha eche. Nashtaniki meata. Shantoramata ingtara. Namaste.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Scott, would you like to share something?
Wow. Okay. I felt that down here. It doesn't translate through the mind. It goes straight to the heart. It's amazing. The story of talking to your mom. This past weekend, my uncle ended up in the hospital. He's out in Denver, and his kids are all spread across the country, and trying to help them deal with it. And he's going through the exact same things my dad did 2 years ago when he passed. And I had those discussions that I'd never had with my father. I never had those discussions before when I was younger, only when I was older. He told me about his upbringing when he was 7 years old. I had never heard these stories. When he grew up, he was working at 5 and 7 years old because my grandfather was in prison and he was trying to bring home money to the family. So he was sweeping floors for 5 cents for working for the entire day. And it was amazing, just some of the stories. And I got such understanding of who he was and why he saw the world as he did. And there was that that interchange, that leap of father son, and I saw him for more than what I had always pictured him to be in the picture I had of him, and why. And that understanding was full. And I was angered in a way because it took so long to get there. I would wish I had heard these stories years before. It would have led to so much more understanding, so much more pleasure in our communication. And it's that those changes can happen at any time. Any time. I abhor I wish for everybody out there, anybody who sees this, know that no matter where you are, your circumstances, where you are in life, how high, how low you are, that there is an opportunity to change, to manifest the life you truly want by living it each and every day. I have to say thank you. I absolutely adore this panel. They give me so much on a regular basis. I hope that anyone who tunes in can see that and hear that and feel that, everything that is given here. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Scott. You know, your story about your uncle and your father reminds me of my own father, who my mom and my father got divorced when I was 9 years old, and my father kind of disappeared from my life until I was about 27, 28 years old. And it was around the time that my daughter was about to be born. And I decided unilaterally that I wanted to reconnect with my father. So there was a pretty long process before I finally tracked him down. But I remember I sent him a letter. I can't remember the contents of my letter, but I just remember that what I got back from him was a letter and some flowers. He sent some flowers, and just the gesture of the flowers touched me deeply, you know. And so it was an opening. But even then, I was still only 28, 29 years old, and I hadn't really started my personal growth work. So I still had no idea how to relate to my father. And it wasn't until, when was that? It was 1982 timeframe. And it wasn't until 2004, about 6 or 8 months before he died, that I really had a one-on-one, heart-to-heart conversation with him. And it was beautiful. A lot of tears were shed. I'm feeling it right now. Sorry. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is never underestimate your parents. Never underestimate their ability to open their hearts. No matter what you might think of them, no matter how closed you might think they are, they're people. They're just ordinary human beings like you and me. And they've gone through their own life experience, dealing with life in the best way they knew how, with whatever tools they had available to them at the time. We're doing the same thing. So find a way to love your parents. Find a way to forgive them, no matter how horrific the situations might have been in your life. And the reason that you want to forgive them is not so much to let them off the hook if they did something really bad, but rather to give yourself the freedom to grow and develop and just blossom into your own truth. And that's really what we're here, what we're all about, is to encourage that kind of growth. So Sarah, I know you've got to get going. I just want to say thank you again. If you have a final word, you can go ahead and.
Just thank you for sharing that, your story, because so many people do go through those things and they struggle to share that. And so thank you for sharing that. Lovely to see you both. I'll see you again soon. Cheers.
See you later, Sarah.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Gail.
Ooh, Sarah's story, her share was very powerful. I felt a lot opening with all of us. And David, thank you for sharing your experience with your dad. I think that her story really is such an important reminder. And I think it was a really important message for all of us that it's never too late. And to pay attention to those times when you tell yourself they'll never change or I'll never change, right?
Right.
This is hitting me too, because I'm in the midst of some intimate family relations where there's a lot of growth happening, and sometimes growth is not easy.
They don't
People are
call
in
it
different.
growing pains for no reason.
That's right, and people are in different places, and it can be. I think it's whether you want to call it the ego mind again or just protection. When we get to a certain stage, we're no longer available to sort of be taken advantage of, and sometimes that can fall into the category of really being rigid with our boundaries. It's important
Mhm.
to be clear with our boundaries. It's a different thing altogether to be rigid with our boundaries, and I think it can blind us to the fact that change is always possible,
Well,
and it's
change ultimately, I think, is inevitable. You know, there's
right,
no way to avoid change. However, the question is really whether we embrace change or whether we resist change. And each of those choices is going to have a different consequence, you
right.
know?
And I guess I'm speaking about this from the perspective of sometimes we change so much, and the people around us
Right,
aren't changing, and then that causes friction. And this is how it's hitting. This is kind of how Sarah's and your message is hitting me is, and I've literally had this happen to me this year with someone who I thought would never change, and then all of a sudden we would just both a vibrational match, and it's a completely different dynamic for us. I never thought it was possible, but clearly the two of us have been off on our own doing our own work, and we came back together, and it was like, okay, we're starting afresh, we're starting anew, and if that can happen, there's the possibility for that to be able to happen with anyone, and we can't control that for other people. And so it's really remembering to hold the space for possibility while also having those healthy
right.
boundaries.
You come
And it
together
can
and you
happen at
say,
any
"Who are
age,
you
like
and what have you
Sarah
done
said.
with my friend?"
Right, yeah. It was mind-blowing. I was like, "Oh my gosh, am I," I like to talk about different realities and
Sure.
different timelines, and it felt like a timeline jump. I talk about a quantum leap. I was
Well,
like,
and
"Okay,
that's
we are in a different place altogether."
right, right. And maybe that's, it's too bad that that idea of a timeline jump didn't happen sooner, but that's a really, really good point. Um, but I know that we're kind of running out of time here, and so I just want to say thank you for being here. Thanks to all the panelists. This has really been a deep and far-reaching conversation, very dear to my heart. Yeah, I want to thank everybody for being open and vulnerable and honest and true. That's ultimately all we can ask of each other, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you,
so to
David.
everybody who's watching or anybody watching the recording, I just want to say thank you for being here and remind you that the recording of this and every other episode of this program, the Soul Empowerment Program, is available on my website at yourlifemasterycoach.com. See you later next time on Soul Empowerment.